All right, so one of the challenges to doing independent game development is that, there's a lot of value to just asking people things, talking through things with people it's not always 100% clear how you should do things and what the right solution is and that sort of thing. And one of the challenges I've had is that when I jump into a room of game designers, online chat room or whatever, game designers or programmers or whatever, right off the bat, I have a lot of trouble explaining the context of the game. And I think it's because what I'm doing with this game is unusual. And I've been criticized by some people, and this is an understandable criticism. There's lots of naive folks out there that think they're doing something that's so creative that it's amazing. And I think sometimes I come across that way, and that's understandable. But I do think that what I'm doing is very unique. And there's a very good reason that I think that is because before I ever started on it, I kind of put together my goals and a high-level design. And then I went looking, because I was looking at this right from the get-go as a business. And I went looking for who's my competition. And I could not find any competition. The fact that I couldn't find any competition led me to two possibilities. One, my idea is a terrible idea and everyone who's tried it has failed and therefore there's nobody else out there doing it. That's a very negative way to look at things. But the second one is that nobody has thought to put something together in this way, or one way or another has never progressed to the point where it became an actual product out there that people are using. So I went around looking, and what I saw was a lot of partial implementations of what I've done. And I talked to a number of people who I thought were potential target audiences for this kind of thing. And I got pretty consistent, good, not universal, but pretty consistent positive view on it. They thought this would be something they would be interested in. Despite the fact that I live in the real world and I've been around a little while, and I'm very reticent to say, oh yeah, I've come up with a new idea no one's ever thought of before. I went at this from the aspect, well, let's prove to myself that this is an old idea that, has failed or people aren't interested in or whatever. And I couldn't prove that to myself. Now to clarify something, I don't think that anything I'm doing is groundbreaking. That's a term that people love to use to say, oh yeah, you think you're doing something groundbreaking. It's kind of a critical, people will say it in kind of a critical way, in a bit of mockery and or criticism. And again, I understand that. I'm not going to claim that anything I'm doing is groundbreaking. What I think that I have done here is combine a lot of components that are out there in a lot of games. I think I've combined in a way that is unique. And I'll do some demos here shortly. Try to get past this part and get to the demos, which I think most people would want to see. My reasons for not going straight to the demo is because visually I have noticed that people relate things to things that they're familiar with. And again, that's just how people are. But the problem is when you're doing something that's unique, they look at it and it is visually, it looks like a roguelike. And so they just go, oh, it's a roguelike. Immediately make a bunch of assumptions, and this is especially frustrating for me when I'm trying to get advice and stuff, is trying to, people are like, well, what's the game look like? If I show them what the game looks like, they'll start giving me a bunch of advice that is not applicable to the game, because in their head they take a quick look, they go, oh, roguelike, this is how you do it in roguelike. There are a lot of things that, because of the nature of the game, I can't do in the way that, a roguelike would do it. So, when I shortly get to the demonstrations, it's going to look like a roguelike. And if you're going to understand the game and why I'm having the challenges I am, you need to ignore what it looks like and pay attention to how it plays. The high-level goal for this is replicate the tabletop role-playing experience in an online format while utilizing the software to make it more fun. I've been playing paper-based role-playing games for over 30 years. And one of the things that I never liked about it was the amount of time that is spent figuring out, especially with the newer versions that get more and more detailed. If you go back to the original Dungeons and Dragons and compare it to the current edition of Dungeons and Dragons, and you decide to calculate what your roll is to hit, what you need to roll to hit a monster, it's significantly more complicated now than it was, when I was a kid playing it. Because when I was a kid playing it, you just look at the armor class, you look at your 2-hit roll, and that's what you had to roll. Nowadays, you have, power attacks and all these different things. Now my point being is it's gotten, to me, it's sapped a lot of the fun out of the game, because you have people that spend a lot of time min-maxing the stats, and Novus players are challenged because, well, you can't do that. Oh, don't forget to add this. I mean, to me, it takes a lot of the fun of it. The game. The fun of the game is killing people, taking their stuff, and then occasionally doing some kind of role playing where you trick somebody, or that kind of thing. To me, the fun is not a bunch of die rolling and a bunch of math. I mean, if I want that, I'll get a job that pays me to do that. So the idea is that a computer is really good at math. A computer is really good at keeping track of statistics and that sort of thing. Have the computer do all of those things, and let the players just play the game. So on the top, if you're familiar with this genre, you're probably thinking, oh, there's stuff out there. There's Roll20, blah, blah, blah. Yes, there are things out there that take some of that away. The degree to which I'm taking it away from the players and simplifying it, I don't know of anything that does that in a multiplayer format. If you know of something, let me know. I would like to keep track of what competition is out there. Right now I see the competition for this game, I see things like Roll20 and those kind of things that are like assistants, which is all this is, but this is a much more sophisticated assistant than anything I've ever seen. It is multiplayer, and that is one of the places where it deviates strongly from roguelikes, is there's no AI. You have, if you have n number of players, one of those players is the game master, and the game master controls all of the NPCs. The NPCs have no AI, they don't do anything on their own. The game master has to control them. That, in my experience, is very unique. Pretty much anything else out there that people would call a role-playing game, the enemies are computer controlled. It's browser-based. While that's not groundbreaking, I think that's just important to point out. It does influence some of the technical decisions, some of the technical challenges. I did not want it to be something that people had to install. One of my early design goals was to make it as quick to jump in and play as possible, which means you shouldn't have to install software, you shouldn't have to worry. And the best way that I know of to do that is to just have the thing run inside a browser, because everybody's already got a browser. And the last one that I think is a little bit unique, because you don't usually see this in role-playing games, is there's no fixed turns. And this is, in my experience, the most difficult concept to get across to people, because describing it doesn't work. Let me hop into a demo. So one of the first things to keep in mind is that because the game has no AI, the game has no maps. It has no dungeons, it has no pre-built stuff like that. And as a result, the game master creates the maps, and I'm in the map editor right now. You can see in a lot of ways it's pretty rudimentary, but you can see I can draw floors and walls, and this is one of the challenges that I get when people when I ask people for assistance and when I'm discussing the game with people online is they'll tell me, well, just make sure that your maps don't do this or that or the other thing. And that is really, really difficult when you have a level designer like this, because I can't assume that that there's any particular design or feature that the maps won't have. If I'm going to disallow that feature, I have to explicitly disallow it in the level designer. Now, on the one hand, this isn't a new problem. There's lots of games out there that have level designers, but the way that I expect this to be used, I don't know of anything else out there that's doing it. And if you think of your typical group of gamers that get together once a week to play, Dungeons and Dragons or GURPS or whatever, not all cases, but in a lot of cases, if the game master, there's a lot of game masters out there that make their own content. And as a result, they're going to create a dungeon, draw a map, and populate it with monsters and whatever else. And there's no play testing. Because, the people that they would playtest something, that's, the first time they're playing it with their group. So that is, I feel like, a challenge. In most cases, when you design a level, you didn't go out and playtest it before you release it broadly. In this case, I wanted to make sure that this was something that a human being could understand well enough and understand the mechanics of it well enough to create a dungeon in a reasonable amount of time. And the other thing is these people are generally not going to want to spend, days and days and hours building something. They want to be able to bang it together pretty quickly. So there's kind of this requirement that it has to be simple enough that a person can learn to use it efficiently very quickly. So they can translate what's in their head into the computer without a lot of fidgeting, without a lot of time. But then it has to be also simple enough that it has to have this combination of things, whereas people can't design themselves into disasters. If I put together a dungeon and tomorrow night my group are going to play it, the last thing I want is to create a dungeon and then once we start to play it, find out for some reason it doesn't work. So there's some interesting challenges there that I think they're very different from your typical level, the challenges you would have with a typical level designer, where with typical level design, you're going to design the level and then you're going to play test it, and then you're going to go out and release it. This needs to skip the play testing altogether. And surprisingly, this is one of my kind of things where I feel like I've done a very good job. I can sit down, for my playtesting purposes, I can sit down and create a new map in about 20 to 30 minutes that me with a group of players will play for an hour and a half. And it usually works out with either minimal or no glitches. And I think the reason it works is because of the simplicity. One of the challenges I have when I'm discussing the game with people, especially when I'm asking for advice, is it's natural for people to say, well, just add this little bit of complexity and that will give you the flexibility you want or whatever. And the problem is there's a massive danger to adding any complexity to the level design, and that it could break what right now is one of the most successful parts of the system, is the ability to quickly and easily build something that will just work. So it's not to say that I can never add complexity, but there is a lot of danger to doing so, and I'm very reluctant to do it because it's working so well. Here I'm in playing an actual game. I have to have two browsers open so I can play both the player in one browser and the GM in the other browser. So the overall play style is basically the game master, this is the screen you're looking at now, has all of the NPCs, and you can see my reticle is snapping to them as I hover. And if I switch over to the player screen, the player only has whatever they're playing. The player selects an action and may have additional information they need to select based on this. Now this character has an action, and yet the game is not going to progress because it can't progress until all characters have an action. And one of the challenges to the game is the GM can get quickly overloaded. As you can see, I have 9 characters to manage. So basically, if I need to do something with all of these, the time it takes for the GM to do, to set up his turn is approximately, for this dungeon is 9 times longer than any one player, which is kind of hilarious because this is a very small dungeon I use for a lot of demonstrations and testings. And I've built dungeons much bigger than this that have 30, 40 NPCs in them. So you can imagine. Now, the good side to this is that most of these people don't need to do anything yet. So I have this wait remaining button, and as you can see, the player's action that they gave triggers. Here's where things get a little interesting. If I decide to move this player, back up earlier in the start part of the map, he has to travel all that way. You saw the thing. If I switch over to the GM and I give one of that GM's characters a move activity that is relatively short, now I'm going to say the remaining characters are just going to wait. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. What you're going to see is an example of how the variable turn system works. What we can see here is that the little creature that I gave a short movement to has taken his turn, and everybody's turn is now over because that was the shortest amount of time that a turn could take for that turn. We can see, however, that the player, the action they selected is not complete, so the player is still active. And if I come over to here, you can see that I don't have the option to select another action. This is an interesting dynamic to the game because trying to describe it to people, I'm almost never successful. I try to describe it to people and they're like, so it's turn-based, so it's not turn-based, so it's real-time, and they can't seem to grasp this concept. As soon as people play the game, they generally tend to pick up on it pretty quickly. It is turn-based, but with variable length turns, I think is the most accurate way to describe it. And this presents some challenges. When you give a character an action for a turn in the game, you expect them to execute that action. So let's come over to here. If I move this person here, and then I move this same person through that same area, what we've seen is this character slowed down to avoid colliding with this character. And that is kind of the universal collision avoidance system that I have in the game at this time. Where this can get complicated is I have this narrow doorway, and that's how I want all of these guys want to go through this doorway. The challenge I have here is with the collisions, they're all not going to fit. And, the idea of having one character slow down to let the other characters pass works for the most part, but not always. And calculating it can get very complicated. So basically the game falls back on if it can't figure out how to keep people from colliding, it just cancels their action and sends you a message that people ran into things. The ideal way to make this work is that somehow have human interaction where people where the characters just figure out how to sort their way through a narrow space. The problem is what you have here is when you start talking about pathfinding, if I want these characters to go over here, the shortest path would be down through here. However, if this is blocked, then they can go around this way. And because it's not AI controlled, if I select this character and I say move here, and the game draws this line, I select that destination trusting that the game is going to follow the line that it showed me. However, once we have actual movement happening, this path could be blocked. And the algorithm, if it just assumes this is blocked, is going to reroute the character up around here, which is not only going to be surprising to the player, but it would be frustrating. And in the worst case, it could basically ruin gameplay. If a player is trying to sneak someone through a back passage and instead their character unexpectedly runs off and gives themselves away to the enemy, I mean, the AI has just ruined gameplay. It's ruined that scenario for the player. So I have to be very, very careful about the decisions and changes I can make to actions. And the other thing is because this is a turn-based game, and because the turns are variable, turns can be very long. So if I go through to give an idea, a more concrete idea, if I select this character and I want him to move all the way over here, when I tell the rest of the players to just wait for this turn, that entire movement is now the length of the turn. This has some tremendous advantages because when the players are doing things that would normally take a long time, there's not interruptions. Those things can just happen. But it has the disadvantage that once this starts, there's no way for me to interrupt this movement. Like if it turns out this guy is going, like if I wanted him to go down through this way and he went that way instead, there's no way for me to interrupt that because from the server side, it's already happened. The client is simply now animating what the result that the server has calculated. You could argue that I could do it differently and have it so that they could be interrupted. But the problem is, again, the uniqueness of, I think this is one of the most unique parts of the game, is the GM's perspective. If the GM is having a bunch of creatures move around, trying to follow all of them and decide, oh wait, can't stop. And it's too much. It is way too much for the GM. It ruins the ability of the GM to play the game. So when it comes down to gameplay, the GM's making the GM's job manageable is easily the biggest challenge. And a lot of the questions and a lot of the discussions I have with people are based on this, trying to solve this problem. Because on the other hand, there has to be some AI in. If every time the characters can't do exactly what the GM wants, it cancels. Because the early versions of the game, that's how it worked. If a character couldn't do exactly what the player told it to do, it would cancel the activity and the player would have to change it. Which meant every time something unexpected happened, the game would stop. We'd have a short turn. And we would have this problem where the game progressed very slowly and the pacing was terrible because you can't move because it's taking so long, because every time you move, somebody moves in front of you, the game cancels the action because now you're running into someone. So a number of experiments with it. So far the best option I've found is to see if slowing, think about it from a realistic perspective. Whatever your top speed is, whatever speed you walk at, you can always walk a little slower. And that's actually, when you think about it, that's the way, if two people are coming to a door that only one person can fit through at a time, that's kind of the most common way that we deal with that problem in real life, is we say, oh, well, one or the other of us is just going to slow down and let the other person go first. So that's actually been pretty successful at minimizing the number of undesired interruptions. You think about it from the player's perspective. The player wants to give their character an action, and then they want to see the result of that action, and they want to give their character another action. That's fun. You're engaged, you're playing the game. If you give your character an action and they stop and you have to fix it, and then they stop again, you have to fix it, that becomes tedious. So that's the problem I'm trying to solve. But at the same time, from the GM standpoint, because the GM has so many characters to manage, I need to minimize that stoppage. It's even more important. But at the same time, the characters can't behave in ways that are too unexpected, because now that violates the rule of the player being in control. Another problem that comes into play occasionally is the complexity of validating that everything works properly. The classic approach to this is unit testing. When you've got two characters that can move, you make a test map, you have starting locations and ending locations for both characters, you have the way you expect it to happen, and it's relatively easy to validate that. With three characters, now the number of combinations and the way that they potentially could interact starts to get pretty high. As soon as you add a fourth character, it gets even higher. And when you're trying to dynamically adjust them to avoid unwanted interactions, that code is trying to understand the determinism of that code and trying to validate it, especially when you're not even really sure how that should work, is very challenging. But that's still simple compared to adding the other actions the characters could take. The characters could move, they could attack. There's different weapons that have different ranges that they could attack with. And on top of it, they have the option to do things like switch weapons, reload, a weapon that has a certain number of charges, like a pistol, they can reload it. They can do a healing action. There's all of these actions are going to interact in some way. What happens if a character is reloading their pistol and somebody walks into them? What happens if a character is trying to shoot somebody and they move behind a wall so you can't hit them? Meanwhile, another character steps out from behind the wall to where they could be shot. These kind of things. The number of different interactions. If you think about it, just a number of, you look at all the potential map layouts that could occur, the numbers of characters and all the movements they can make, just validating that the movement is going to behave in a way that's expected is extraordinarily difficult. But when you start adding in things like attacks and reloads and heals and that sort of thing, it gets even more complicated. You essentially have an infinite number of maps that these things could occur on. add that to the number of combinations of actions occurring simultaneously times the number of potential characters that could be on the map at any one time, it's very, very hard to validate all this. And as a result, I'm constantly looking for, my solution to this has been largely a lot of playtesting. I try to create unit tests whenever I feel like I have an easy to verify outcome. In a lot of cases, I don't know how to determine what the outcome should be. And in a lot of cases, I just don't know how many cases I could be looking at. One of the tricks with playtesting, though, is to get actual useful feedback. Because these interactions are complicated, it's not enough to be playtesting and say, oh, why did my character stop moving? That's not desired. Okay, well that's something we know that we want to fix. But why did the character stop moving? Internally, what part of the code triggered that caused the character to stop moving? There is a lot of data there that needs to be analyzed to understand why the code made that decision. If I output that data constantly as we're playing, then the amount of data that comes out of each playtest is unbelievably difficult to digest. But if I try to reduce that data to a manageable amount, the possibility that I'm going to miss the key piece of information that tells me why a certain behavior is happening is very high. And this is a very recent development, is I came up with a system that basically records a massive amount of data while these decisions are being made, but then only records it permanently if certain trigger conditions occur. And that has been working really well. It strikes a balance between, getting all of that information you need, but not getting it all the time. It's not perfect. Sometimes I don't recognize a trigger condition until after it's happened, so we don't see the data because the code doesn't know to log on that trigger condition. But it's an improvement over the constant effort of trying to find the perfect amount of data so that you have the details when you need it, but there's not an overwhelming amount of data when you don't need it. So there's a lot of challenges to this. I hope I've described things in a way such that when I ask questions, I can point people to these videos and they'll at least have a better concept of the game and what the challenges are. And if you have any questions, please ask. I love talking about it.